Welcome to WooEnglish, where we learn English through engaging and insightful stories. Today, we embark on a journey through history, exploring the presidency of Richard Nixon, a tale of triumph, scandal, and lessons learned. Our story is crafted with clear and simple sentences, perfect for enhancing your English understanding and skills. If you find this story helpful, please press the like button to reward our efforts. Your comments and likes motivate us to create more content like this. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the story together. Remember, every like and comment not only supports us, but also connects you with a community of learners just like you. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1. The Road to Presidency. Once upon a time, in a small house in California, a boy named Richard Nixon was born. His family was not rich, but they were full of love and dreams for the future. Young Richard grew up with a strong sense of responsibility and a desire to achieve great things. Richard worked hard in school. He was not the most popular child, but he was smart and determined. His parents taught him the value of honesty and hard work. These lessons would guide him throughout his life. After finishing high school, Richard went to a college called Whittier, where he became a leader among his peers. He was passionate about helping others and making his voice heard. This passion led him to study law, a path that would open many doors for him in the future. After college, Richard served in the Navy during World War II. This experience taught him about the world beyond his small town and sparked an interest in politics. He saw how decisions made by leaders could have a big impact on people's lives. When Richard returned from the war, he decided to enter politics. He believed he could make a difference. In 1946, he ran for a seat in the US Congress and won. This was just the beginning of his journey in politics. As a congressman, Richard worked hard and made a name for himself. He was known for his dedication to his country and his willingness to stand up for what he believed in. He fought against what he saw as unfairness and worked to protect the American way of life. In 1952, Richard took a big step forward in his career. He was chosen to be the running mate of Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Republican candidate for president. Eisenhower and Nixon won the election, and Richard became the Vice President of the United States. As Vice President, Richard traveled the world, meeting with leaders of other countries. He gained a lot of experience in foreign affairs, which would be very useful in the future. But Richard's journey was not always smooth. He faced challenges and controversies. Despite this, he never gave up. He kept working towards his goal of making America and the world a better place. In 1960, Richard ran for president, but he lost in a very close race to John F. Kennedy. This loss was a big disappointment for Richard, but he did not let it defeat him. He continued to be involved in politics and worked on building his vision for America's future. 8 years later, in 1968, Richard Nixon ran for president again. The United States was going through a difficult time. There were wars abroad and unrest at home. People were looking for a leader who could bring the country together and lead it through these challenging times. Richard promised to be that leader. He spoke about his plans for peace in the world and prosperity at home. He talked about bringing Americans together and moving forward. His message resonated with many people. Finally, after years of hard work and dedication, Richard Nixon's dream came true. He won the election and became the President of the United States. It was a long and challenging road, but he had reached the highest office in the land. His journey from a small house in California to the White House was a testament to the power of determination, hard work, and belief in oneself. As president, Richard would face many challenges, but he was ready to lead his country. He had plans for peace, for making the economy stronger, and for ensuring justice for all Americans. His journey to the presidency was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life and in the history of the United States. Richard Nixon's story shows us that with hard work and perseverance, we can overcome challenges and achieve our dreams. It teaches us the importance of standing up for what we believe in and working towards making the world a better place. His road to the presidency is a reminder that in America, anything is possible if you set your mind to it. Chapter 3. Détente with the Soviet Union. In a world where two great countries stood on opposite sides, a time known as the Cold War, there was much fear and tension. The United States and the Soviet Union, each powerful and wary of the other, were rivals in a race for global influence. It was during this time Richard Nixon, now president, decided to write a new chapter in history. Nixon had a vision, a bold and brave idea, to ease the tension between these two giants. This idea was called détente, a French word that means relaxation. Nixon believed that by talking and building relationships, the United States and the Soviet Union could reduce the risk of war and live in peace. It was a hope for a future where children could sleep without fear, and nations could work together for the good of all. To make détente a reality, Nixon and his advisor, Henry Kissinger, began to plan. They knew it would not be easy. Many people doubted them, believing the Soviet Union could never be trusted. But Nixon was determined. He believed that through careful negotiation and mutual respect, anything was possible. One of the key moments in Nixon's efforts was the Strategic Arms Limitation talks, known as SALT. These talks were about controlling the number of powerful weapons each country had. Both the United States and the Soviet Union knew that having too many weapons was dangerous. They could destroy the world many times over if they chose to use them. Nixon and the leader of the Soviet Union, Leonid Brezhnev, met to discuss how they could make the world safer. It was a historic meeting, full of tense moments, but also moments of understanding. They talked about their countries, their hopes for peace, and the fears they shared about war. It was not easy, but they were making progress. After much discussion, they reached an agreement. This agreement was a promise to each other and to the world. They would limit the number of weapons they had, reducing the threat of destruction. It was a step towards peace, a sign that détente could work. People around the world watched with hope. It seemed like a new era was beginning, an era where dialogue and respect could overcome suspicion and fear. Nixon had taken a huge risk with détente, but it was starting to pay off. The agreement from the SALT talks was a symbol of what could be achieved when nations chose to talk rather than fight. But détente was more than just about weapons. It was about building a relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union. Nixon visited the Soviet Union, a gesture of goodwill and friendship. It was an incredible moment, the President of the United States walking on Soviet soil, talking about peace and cooperation. This visit was a powerful message to the world that change was possible. However, not everyone was happy with détente. Some people in both countries thought their leader was giving up too much. They were afraid of change and suspicious of the other side. But Nixon and Brezhnev knew that their path was the right one. They believed in a future where their countries could work together, not as enemies but as partners. The journey of détente was like a long and winding road, with ups and downs, hopes and fears. But it was a journey worth taking. Nixon's efforts to reduce Cold War tensions had shown the world that peace was possible, even between the greatest of rivals. As the story of détente unfolded, it taught us an important lesson. It showed that with courage, vision, and the willingness to talk, even the coldest wars could be warmed. It reminded us that in the hands of leaders willing to reach out to each other, the future could be shaped by peace, not war. Chapter 4. Opening Relations with China. In a world divided by cold wars and high walls, President Richard Nixon made a decision that would change the course of history. In 1972, he did something no American president had done before. He visited China. This was a momentous occasion because, for many years, the United States and China had been distant, without direct communication. Nixon's trip to China was not just a journey across the globe. It was a step towards building a bridge between two very different worlds. Before Nixon's groundbreaking visit, the United States and China had been isolated from each other for nearly 25 years. There were no talks or trade between them, only suspicion and silence. However, Nixon believed that opening relations with China could lead to a better future, not just for the two countries, but for the whole world. He thought that by talking and working together, they could solve problems and reduce tensions. The idea of going to China was risky. Many people in the United States were unsure about it. They wondered why Nixon wanted to reach out to a country that had been an adversary for so long. But Nixon had a vision. He saw that the world was changing and believed that the United States needed to change with it. He wanted to create a world where countries talked to each other instead of turning their backs. So, in February 1972, Nixon and his team flew to China. It was a historic moment when Air Force One landed in Beijing. People all over the world watched on their televisions, amazed to see an American president in China. Nixon's visit was full of important meetings and events, but it was also a symbol of hope. It showed that even the greatest divides could be crossed with courage and diplomacy. One of the highlights of Nixon's trip was his meeting with Mao Zedong, the leader of China. Mao was a legendary figure, and his meeting with Nixon was a powerful statement that both countries were ready to start a new chapter in their relationship. They talked about many things, including how the United States and China could work together to face common challenges. Nixon also spent time with Zhou Enlai, China's premier. Together, they discussed plans for the future and how their countries could cooperate in areas like trade, science, and culture. These talks were the beginning of a new relationship between the United States and China. They agreed to disagree on some issues, but also to find ways to work together. The visit was a success. Nixon's trip did not solve all the problems between the United States and China, but it was a start. It opened the door to more communication and cooperation. After Nixon's visit, the two countries began to talk more, trade with each other, and understand each other better. This change did not happen overnight, but Nixon's visit to China was the spark that lit the fire of friendship. Nixon's journey to China taught the world an important lesson. It showed that diplomacy and dialogue are powerful tools that can bring people together, even those who have been apart for a long time. It proved that leaders could change the world by taking bold steps towards peace. Opening relations with China was one of Nixon's most significant achievements. It changed the way countries interacted and showed that even the most significant differences could be bridged by mutual respect and understanding. Nixon's visit to China was a daring adventure, a leap into the unknown, and it opened a new era in international relations. Chapter 5. The Vietnam War. Once upon a time, in a land far away called Vietnam, a war was raging. It was a complex and painful conflict that involved many countries, including the United States. When Richard Nixon became president, he inherited this war. It was a difficult challenge, but Nixon had a plan. He wanted to end the war in a way that would bring peace and honor to all involved. This chapter tells the story of Nixon's approach to the Vietnam War, a plan called Vietnamization, and a secret mission that would cause much controversy. The war in Vietnam had been going on for many years before Nixon took office. It was a war that caused much sadness and division both in Vietnam and in the United States. Many American soldiers were far from home, fighting in difficult conditions, and many people in both countries wished for the war to end. Nixon believed that the United States should not fight the war for Vietnam. Instead, he thought that the Vietnamese people should take the lead in defending their country. This idea led to the policy of Vietnamization. The goal was to train and equip the South Vietnamese forces so they could take over the fighting, while American troops gradually came back home. Nixon hoped this would allow the United States to leave Vietnam without causing the South to fall to the North. To support Vietnamization, Nixon also sought to weaken the North Vietnamese and their allies. This led to one of the most controversial decisions of his presidency, the secret bombing of Cambodia. The aim was to destroy the supply routes and bases used by the North Vietnamese, but the bombing was kept secret from the American public and Congress for a time. The secret bombing caused a storm of controversy when it was revealed. Many people were upset that the war was being expanded into another country without their knowledge. Protests erupted across the United States, with people demanding an end to the war and transparency from their government. Despite the controversy, Nixon continued with his plan. He believed that Vietnamization and the weakening of the enemy's resources were the best ways to end the war responsibly. Gradually, American troops began to return home, and the South Vietnamese took on more of the fighting. This shift was slow and not without its challenges, but it marked a significant change in the United States' role in the war. Nixon also pursued peace talks with the North Vietnamese. These talks were difficult and often seemed like they would not lead to anything. However, Nixon was determined to find a way to peace. After much negotiation, a peace agreement was finally reached in 1973. This agreement allowed for the withdrawal of all American troops and aimed to bring peace to Vietnam. The Vietnam War and Nixon's policies, including Vietnamization and the secret bombing of Cambodia, were complex and controversial. Nixon's approach aimed to bring an honorable end to the war, but it also led to much debate and division within the United States. The war's legacy would be felt for many years to come, in both Vietnam and the United States. Chapter 6: Domestic Policies and Achievements. In a time of change and challenge, President Richard Nixon took on not just battles abroad, but also important work at home. This story tells of Nixon's efforts to improve life in the United States through his domestic policies, focusing on the environment, public health, and new beginnings for agencies aimed at protecting the country's future. As president, Nixon saw that America's beautiful landscapes, air, and water were in danger. Pollution was a growing problem, and people were worried about the health of the planet. Nixon listened to these concerns and decided to act. He believed it was essential to take care of the environment, not just for the present, but for all the generations to come. One of Nixon's most significant steps was the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, known as the EPA, in 1970. This powerful agency was like a guardian of nature. Its job was to make sure the air was clean to breathe, the water was safe to drink, and the land was protected from pollution. The EPA set rules for businesses and people to follow, helping to make the environment healthier for everyone. But Nixon didn't stop there. He also signed important laws that would leave a lasting impact on the country's natural beauty and health. The Clean Air Act, for example, was a breath of fresh air. It aimed to reduce air pollution from factories and cars, making the skies clearer and the air healthier. The Clean Water Act followed, focusing on keeping the rivers, lakes, and oceans clean and full of life. Nixon's care for the environment also led to the Endangered Species Act. This law was a promise to protect animals and plants that were in danger of disappearing forever. It was like a safety net for the country's wildlife, ensuring that future generations would still be able to marvel at the diversity of life on Earth. Apart from the environment, Nixon also worked on other domestic policies to improve American life. He introduced measures to reform healthcare and welfare, aiming to help those in need and ensure that everyone could have access to medical care. Although not all his proposals became law, they started important conversations about how to help Americans live healthier, more secure lives. Nixon also focused on civil rights, continuing the work of previous administrations to ensure equality for all Americans. He enforced desegregation of schools and supported affirmative action, a policy to help minority groups get equal opportunities in education and employment. These actions showed Nixon's commitment to a fairer society, where everyone had the chance to succeed. One of Nixon's lesser-known achievements was his push for space exploration. After the excitement of the moon landing in 1969, he established the Space Shuttle program. This program promised to make space travel more regular, opening up new possibilities for science and exploration. It was a dream of reaching the stars, not just for the sake of adventure, but for the knowledge and progress that could benefit all humankind. Nixon's domestic policies and achievements showed a president who was thinking about the future. He faced many challenges, from environmental crises to social inequalities, but he took action to address them. His decisions laid the groundwork for changes that would protect the planet, improve public health, and make society more equitable. This chapter in Nixon's presidency is a story of vision and action. It highlights how a leader can impact people's lives and the environment through thoughtful policies. Nixon's efforts to protect nature, support civil rights, and explore new frontiers remind us of the power of government to bring about positive change. Despite the controversies and challenges of his presidency, these domestic achievements stand as a testament to what can be accomplished with dedication and foresight. As we look back on Nixon's time in office, we can see a complex figure who navigated the country through turbulent times. His domestic policies, especially those related to the environment, leave a legacy that continues to influence American life and policy today. Nixon's story teaches us about the importance of caring for our planet and each other, showing that even in the midst of political struggle, there is always room for progress and hope. Chapter 7. Challenges of the Presidency. Once upon a time, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, President Richard Nixon faced not only global tensions, but storms at home. This story unfolds the tale of Nixon's presidency, a time of economic struggles and social upheaval, revealing the resilience required to lead a nation through turmoil. As Nixon navigated the complexities of international politics, back home, the United States was wrestling with its own internal challenges. The economy was a giant puzzle, with pieces like inflation and unemployment refusing to fit together neatly. Inflation, the rise in prices that makes living more expensive, was particularly stubborn. It was like a balloon that kept getting bigger, making it harder for American families to buy what they needed. Nixon was determined to tame this economic beast. He introduced policies to control inflation and boost employment, but these solutions were not quick fixes. They required time and patience, commodities in short supply. The economic puzzle was complicated by the war in Vietnam, which demanded vast spending, adding more air to the inflation balloon. Amid these economic challenges, the United States was also experiencing social unrest. The country was like a pot on the stove, simmering with issues of civil rights, equality, and the ongoing war in Vietnam. Many people, especially the youth, were demanding change. They wanted an end to racial discrimination and a halt to the Vietnam War. This period saw protests and demonstrations, some peaceful, others turning into violent confrontations. Cities and college campuses became stages for the nation's debates about its future. Nixon, facing these challenges, tried to be a leader who could bring the country together. He sought to address the social issues head-on, calling for law and order, and promising to end the war in Vietnam through his policy of Vietnamization. Yet, the path was fraught with difficulty. The louder the calls for peace and equality, the more polarized the nation seemed to become. Nixon's task was akin to walking a tightrope, balancing the need for stability with the demand for change. One of the most significant moments of social unrest during Nixon's presidency was the tragedy at Kent State University in 1970. Students protesting the bombing of Cambodia clashed with the National Guard, resulting in the deaths of 4 students. This heartbreaking event was a stark reminder of the deep divisions within the country. It prompted a national reflection on the state of democracy and the right to protest. Despite these domestic storms, Nixon continued to seek solutions. He initiated programs to fight crime and drugs, which he saw as scourges undermining American society. He also pushed for reforms in welfare and healthcare, aiming to create a safety net for the most vulnerable. These efforts showed Nixon's understanding that a strong nation needed not just a robust economy, but also social cohesion and care for its citizens. Nixon's presidency was a time of testing for the American spirit. It was a period when the country faced its shadows, grappling with questions about its identity, values, and place in the world. The economic difficulties and social challenges required not just political solutions, but a collective will to move forward, to heal, and to grow. This chapter in Nixon's story teaches us about the resilience needed in times of crisis. It shows that leadership is not just about making decisions from above, but also about listening to the voices of the people, understanding their fears and hopes, and working together towards common goals. The challenges of Nixon's presidency remind us that progress often comes through struggle, and unity is forged in the furnace of debate and dissent. Looking back, we can appreciate the complexities of governing during such turbulent times. Nixon's responses to the economic and social challenges of his era reflect the balancing act of leadership, the pursuit of stability amidst change, and the enduring quest for a more just and prosperous society. This chapter of history, with its trials and tribulations, its conflicts and efforts towards resolution, offers lessons on navigating the storms of governance, highlighting the importance of resilience, dialogue, and the pursuit of common ground in the journey towards national well-being. Chapter 8. Nixon's Foreign Trips. Once upon a time, President Richard Nixon embarked on a series of adventures beyond the borders of the United States. These were not ordinary trips, but journeys that would weave the fabric of global diplomacy, taking him far from the familiar comforts of home to lands with different customs, languages, and challenges. This story highlights Nixon's significant foreign trips, painting a picture of a leader seeking to strengthen America's role on the world stage. After taking office, Nixon understood the importance of connecting with other nations. His travels were not just about handshakes and photo opportunities. They were missions to build bridges, ease tensions, and foster peace in a world divided by Cold War rivalries. One of Nixon's notable trips was to Europe in 1969, shortly after he became president. He visited countries like Italy, West Germany, Great Britain, and France. These visits were crucial for reinforcing the bonds with America's allies. In Europe, Nixon discussed security, trade, and the shared values of freedom and democracy. He wanted to ensure that the ties that bound the United States and Europe were strong and resilient against the challenges of the time. In addition to Europe, Nixon traveled to the Middle East, a region of complex politics and ancient histories. His journey there in 1974 was groundbreaking, making him the first sitting U.S. president to visit countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Nixon's trip to the Middle East aimed to promote peace and stability, especially in the context of the Arab-Israeli conflict. By meeting with leaders from both sides, Nixon sought to lay the groundwork for future peace talks, demonstrating America's commitment to finding a peaceful resolution in the region. Nixon's travels also took him to South America and Africa, where he engaged with leaders and citizens, discussing issues like economic development and cooperation. In these visits, Nixon faced mixed receptions. There were protests, but also opportunities for meaningful dialogue. These trips highlighted the complexities of American influence abroad, showing Nixon's determination to extend a hand of friendship and partnership, even in the face of skepticism or opposition. One of the key themes of Nixon's foreign policy was the belief in personal diplomacy, the idea that direct communication between leaders could lead to breakthroughs and understanding. Nixon's trips were a testament to this belief. He ventured into both friendly and challenging territories, armed with the conviction that face-to-face discussions could pave the way for better relations and a more peaceful world. Nixon's foreign travels reflected a bold approach to international relations. He sought not only to address the immediate issues of his time, but also to lay the foundations for a future where nations could work together more harmoniously. His journeys were about more than just the miles traveled. They were about the steps taken toward a vision of global partnership and peace. Through his travels, Nixon became a familiar figure on the world stage, recognized for his efforts to engage with different cultures and leaders. These trips were essential chapters in the story of his presidency, showcasing his commitment to diplomacy and his role in shaping the course of international politics. Chapter 9. The Watergate Scandal Begins. In a time not too long ago, in the heart of Washington, D.C., a story unfolded that would be remembered for generations. This tale begins on a warm summer night in 1972, at a place called the Watergate Office Complex. It was here, in the quiet shadows, that a group of men embarked on a mission that would shake the foundations of American democracy. This is the story of the beginning of the Watergate scandal, a series of events that started with a break-in and led to one of the biggest political dramas in United States history. The Watergate building was not just any office complex. It housed the Democratic National Committee headquarters, a place buzzing with plans and strategies for the upcoming presidential election. But on that fateful night, the usual quiet was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. 5 men had entered the building, not for theft of money or valuables, but for something much more valuable in the world of politics: information. These men were not ordinary burglars. They were connected to a group called the Committee to Re-elect the President, which supported President Richard Nixon's campaign for a second term. Their mission was to wiretap phones and gather documents that could give their boss an edge in the election. But their plan went awry when a security guard, making his rounds, noticed tape on the locks of the doors, tape that was keeping the doors unlocked. The guard called the police, and soon the 5 men were arrested. At first, the break-in seemed like a simple case of burglary, but as reporters and investigators dug deeper, a much larger story began to emerge. It was discovered that the break-in was just the tip of an iceberg, a small part of a vast campaign of political spying and sabotage orchestrated by members of Nixon's administration. The news of the break-in and the connections to Nixon's re-election campaign sent shockwaves through the country. People began to ask questions. How much did Nixon know about the break-in? Was the president involved in the illegal activities? The scandal, named Watergate after the building where it all started, became a symbol of corruption and abuse of power at the highest levels of government. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, the story of Watergate unfolded like a dramatic play. Reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post were instrumental in uncovering the truth, thanks to their persistent investigative journalism and the guidance of a secret informant known as Deep Throat. Their reporting exposed a web of lies, cover-ups, and attempts to obstruct justice that reached all the way to the Oval Office. The Watergate scandal became a national obsession, dominating headlines and leading to a series of investigations. It was a story that featured secret tapes, hush money, and a cast of characters who found themselves caught up in a crisis that threatened the very principles of American democracy. This chapter of Nixon's presidency teaches us about the fragility of trust and the importance of accountability in leadership. It reminds us that the power entrusted to public officials comes with a profound responsibility to serve with integrity and respect for the law. The beginning of the Watergate scandal marked a dark moment in American history, but it also sparked a collective demand for transparency and justice that would lead to significant changes in the way politics and governance were viewed in the United States. As the scandal unfolded, Americans watched closely, waiting to see how their leaders would respond to the crisis. The story of Watergate is not just about a break-in. It's about the power of truth, the courage to seek it, and the strength of a democracy to confront its own failings and emerge stronger in the end. Chapter 10. The Scandal Unfolds. As the sun rose over Washington, D.C., following the shocking discovery of the break-in at the Watergate complex, the American people were about to witness a political drama unlike any before. The Watergate scandal, which had started with a simple act of burglary, began to unravel, revealing a tangled web of deceit that reached the highest levels of power. This chapter tells the tale of how the scandal unfolded, exposing the truth piece by piece and testing the strength of American democracy. After the arrest of the 5 burglars, the investigation into the Watergate break-in quickly gained momentum. Journalists, especially Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post, played a crucial role in uncovering the facts. They followed every lead, no matter how small, determined to uncover the full story. Their reporting, fueled by information from a secret informant known as Deep Throat, began to reveal a pattern of illegal activities and efforts to sabotage political opponents tied directly to President Nixon's re-election campaign. As the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together, it became clear that the break-in was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader campaign of political espionage and sabotage conducted by individuals associated with Nixon's re-election effort. The revelation of a secret slush fund used to finance these operations shocked the nation and raised serious questions about the integrity of the presidency. Faced with mounting evidence and increasing public scrutiny, Nixon and his aides attempted to contain the scandal. They tried to stop the investigation, claiming it was a matter of national security that could not be publicly discussed. They even went so far as to arrange hush money payments to the burglars to keep them silent. But the truth refused to stay hidden. The more they tried to cover it up, the more determined the investigators and journalists became to bring it to light. One of the most damning revelations came when it was discovered that Nixon had installed a tape recording system in the Oval Office. These tapes were believed to contain conversations that could prove whether Nixon had knowledge of the cover-up. The battle to release these tapes went all the way to the Supreme Court in a case known as United States versus Nixon. The court's decision forced Nixon to hand over the tapes, which ultimately provided undeniable evidence of his involvement in the Watergate cover-up. The release of the tapes was a turning point in the scandal. It revealed conversations in which Nixon discussed the Watergate cover-up and how to use government agencies to thwart the investigation. The American public was stunned. The man they had elected to the highest office in the land was heard plotting against the very principles of justice and democracy. As the scandal unfolded, it became a story of not just political intrigue, but also personal tragedy. Nixon, a man who had achieved the pinnacle of American politics, was now facing the collapse of his presidency. His attempts to protect his administration and secure his legacy had led to the exact opposite. The Watergate scandal eroded public trust in government and led to calls for accountability and reform. This chapter of the Watergate scandal teaches us about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of transparency in government. It shows how the perseverance of individuals, from journalists to judges, can uncover the truth and hold leaders accountable. The unfolding of the Watergate scandal is a reminder that democracy is built on the principles of accountability and the rule of law, and that no one, not even the President of the United States, is above them. As the scandal reached its climax, Nixon faced impeachment and the possibility of criminal charges. The man who had once held the nation's highest trust was now isolated, a figure of controversy and disappointment. The Watergate scandal, which had started with a single act of burglary, had grown into a constitutional crisis that would end with Nixon's resignation, the only time in American history a president has resigned from office. The story of how the Watergate scandal unfolded is a powerful lesson in the importance of integrity, the resilience of the American system of justice, and the enduring value of the truth. It reminds us that democracy, though fragile, has the strength to confront even the gravest challenges, as long as its citizens remain vigilant and committed to the principles upon which it was founded. Chapter 11. The Role of the Media. In the heart of the unfolding drama that was the Watergate scandal, a group of dedicated journalists emerged as unsung heroes. This chapter tells the story of the critical role played by the media, particularly investigative journalists, in bringing the truth of Watergate to light. Their relentless pursuit of the facts would eventually help uphold the principles of justice and democracy in America. As the Watergate scandal began to unfold, the initial reports of the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters seemed to many like a minor story. However, two young reporters from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, sensed there was more beneath the surface. With the guidance of their editor, Ben Bradley, they embarked on a journey of investigation that would test their determination and courage. Woodward and Bernstein faced numerous challenges. They were met with silence or misleading information from many of those involved in the scandal, but they persevered, using every resource available to them. They interviewed countless people, piecing together information bit by bit, like detectives solving a complex puzzle. Their most mysterious source, known only as Deep Throat, provided them with critical information that guided their investigation. This secret informant's identity would remain a mystery for over 30 years, later revealed to be Mark Felt, a high-ranking official in the FBI. The role of the Washington Post and its reporters in uncovering the Watergate scandal highlights the vital importance of a free press in a democratic society. Their reporting brought to light the attempts by Nixon's administration to cover up its involvement in the break-in and other illegal activities. As the scandal grew, other journalists and media outlets also began to investigate and report on the story, creating a wave of public demand for accountability. The media's persistent digging and reporting made it increasingly difficult for the government to ignore or dismiss the growing evidence of wrongdoing. This investigative journalism, driven by a commitment to truth and public interest, played a pivotal role in informing the American people about the abuses of power within the Nixon administration. The courage and determination of Woodward, Bernstein, and other journalists covering Watergate demonstrated the media's role as a watchdog of government. Their work underscored the idea that a free and independent press is essential to the health of a democracy. It acts as a check on power, holding leaders accountable to the people they serve. This chapter of the Watergate story is a tribute to the tenacity of journalists who, often at great personal risk, seek the truth to inform the public and preserve the foundations of democracy. Their work during the Watergate scandal reaffirmed the media's critical role in safeguarding democratic values and ensuring that no individual or government is above the law. The impact of the investigative journalism on the Watergate scandal also serves as a reminder of the responsibilities of the press and the public. It highlights the need for media literacy and critical engagement with news, encouraging citizens to question, understand, and participate actively in their governance. As the Watergate scandal revealed, the path to truth can be fraught with obstacles, but it is a journey that must be undertaken to protect the rights and freedoms of all citizens. The role of the media in this chapter of American history teaches us about the power of persistence, the importance of accountability, and the enduring value of an informed and engaged public in the quest for justice and transparency. Chapter 12. Public Reaction and Political Drama. In the midst of the growing storm that was the Watergate scandal, the American people and those within the Nixon administration found themselves in a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and disbelief. This chapter tells the story of the public reaction to the scandal and the drama that unfolded within the corridors of power, a tale of a nation grappling with a crisis of trust and a government in turmoil. As details of the Watergate scandal began to emerge, thanks to the tireless efforts of journalists and the slow but steady leak of damning information, the American public watched with a mix of shock and fascination. The idea that the President of the United States and his closest advisers could be involved in such activities was almost too much to comprehend. For many, it felt like a betrayal, shaking the very foundations of their trust in the government. Across the country, people gathered around their televisions to watch the Senate Watergate hearings, a series of investigations led by a special committee. These hearings were broadcast live, bringing the drama of Watergate into living rooms and diners, engaging the American public like never before. Key figures from Nixon's administration testified, some admitting to their roles in the scandal, while others staunchly defended the president. Within the Nixon administration, the atmosphere was tense. As the scandal deepened, loyalty to Nixon was tested. Some of his closest aides and advisers found themselves caught between their allegiance to the president and the legal and moral implications of the scandal. The strain led to resignations and dismissals as Nixon struggled to maintain control and protect his presidency. The administration became a place of suspicion and paranoia, with Nixon himself becoming increasingly isolated and combative. Public opinion began to shift as the evidence mounted. Support for Nixon, once strong, started to wane. People from all walks of life, including those who had once voted for him, began to question his fitness for office. The scandal sparked conversations about ethics, power, and the responsibilities of elected officials, discussions that transcended political lines. Protests and demonstrations, which had been a part of the American landscape due to the Vietnam War, now included calls for Nixon's impeachment. The public's demand for accountability and transparency grew louder, a chorus that could not be ignored. The American people, once proud of their president's accomplishments in foreign affairs, felt deceived and demanded justice. The drama within the Nixon administration and the public's reaction to the Watergate scandal revealed deep divisions in American society and highlighted the importance of integrity in public service. It was a moment of reckoning, a time when the values of the nation were tested. The scandal forced Americans to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of power and the necessity of accountability. This chapter of the Watergate story is a testament to the resilience of the American democratic system. It shows that even in times of great crisis, the principles of justice and the rule of law can prevail. The public's engagement with the Watergate scandal, through protests, discussions, and a collective demand for answers, underscored the vital role of citizens in upholding democracy. As the Watergate scandal unfolded, it became more than just a political drama. It was a national trauma that would leave lasting scars. Yet it also served as a powerful reminder of the strength of American institutions and the enduring spirit of its people. The reaction to Watergate, both within the Nixon administration and among the public, demonstrated that, in a democracy, no one is above scrutiny, and the truth, no matter how difficult, must be pursued. This chapter teaches us about the power of public engagement and the critical role of transparency and accountability in maintaining trust between the government and the people it serves. It is a story of a democracy tested, a reminder of the importance of vigilance and participation in ensuring that the ideals of justice and integrity are upheld in the halls of power. Chapter 13. The Tapes That Changed History. In the unfolding saga of the Watergate scandal, a revelation came to light that would alter the course of history. This chapter tells the story of the secret White House recordings, a discovery that would become central to understanding the true extent of the scandal and ultimately contribute to the downfall of President Nixon. These tapes, once hidden from the world, held the key to unlocking the mysteries of Watergate and revealing the truth behind the walls of power. It all began when Alexander Butterfield, a former White House aide, revealed during the Senate Watergate hearings that Nixon had installed a recording system in the Oval Office. This system captured every word spoken in the presence of the president, documenting discussions and decisions that were meant to be private. The existence of these tapes sparked a battle between the White House and those seeking the truth, a struggle that would test the limits of presidential power and the pursuit of justice. The revelation of the tapes offered a glimmer of hope to investigators and the American public. If the tapes could be obtained and listened to, they might provide irrefutable evidence of the president's involvement in the Watergate cover-up. The prospect of such evidence ignited a legal and political firestorm, with Nixon and his lawyers arguing that the tapes were private and protected by executive privilege. However, the principle of executive privilege was challenged by the Special Prosecutor's Office, which argued that no one, not even the President of the United States, could withhold evidence relevant to a criminal investigation. The case, known as United States versus Nixon, eventually reached the Supreme Court, which unanimously ruled that Nixon must surrender the tapes. This landmark decision reaffirmed the notion that the rule of law applies to everyone, regardless of their position or power. When some of the tapes were finally released, they contained shocking admissions and conversations that confirmed the president's involvement in the Watergate cover-up. Among the most damning was a recording from just a few days after the Watergate break-in, in which Nixon was heard discussing the use of the CIA to obstruct the FBI's investigation. This conversation, later known as the smoking gun tape, proved that Nixon had not only known about the cover-up, but had actively participated in it. The release of the smoking gun tape was a turning point in the Watergate scandal. It shattered any remaining support Nixon had in Congress and among the American public. Leaders from Nixon's own party came to the White House to tell him that impeachment was inevitable and that he had lost much of his political support. Faced with the reality of impeachment and the possibility of removal from office, Nixon chose to resign. On August 8, 1974, in a somber and historic television address, Nixon announced his decision to step down as president, becoming the first and only president in American history to do so. The secret White House recordings, once meant to serve as a personal archive, had instead led to his unprecedented downfall. The story of the tapes that changed history is a powerful reminder of the importance of accountability and transparency in government. It shows how a system meant to protect the president's words instead revealed actions that betrayed the trust of the American people. The saga of the Watergate tapes underscores the principle that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually come to light. This chapter of the Watergate scandal teaches us about the dangers of secrecy and the misuse of power. It is a cautionary tale of how the quest for political advantage can lead to the erosion of democratic values and principles. The tapes that changed history serve as a lasting testament to the strength of the American judicial system and the enduring power of the press in uncovering the truth. The impact of the Watergate tapes extends far beyond the events of the 1970s. They remind us of the critical role of checks and balances in a democracy and the essential need for leaders to act with integrity and respect for the rule of law. The Watergate tapes not only changed the course of American history, but also left an indelible mark on the presidency, shaping how future generations would view the office and its holder. Chapter 14. The Fall of Nixon. In a tale of power and pride, the story of President Richard Nixon's fall from grace unfolds like a classic tragedy. It's a story that captures a pivotal moment in American history, marked by a crisis that tested the resilience of the country's democratic institutions. This chapter recounts the events leading up to Nixon's resignation, detailing the erosion of his political support and the impeachment process that signaled the end of his presidency. As the Watergate scandal deepened, with each revelation more damning than the last, the country watched in disbelief. The disclosure of the secret White House recordings had dealt a severe blow to Nixon's credibility and authority. The smoking gun tape, in particular, had shattered any remaining illusions about the president's innocence, revealing his direct involvement in the cover-up. Faced with irrefutable evidence of wrongdoing, Nixon's base of support began to crumble. Long-standing allies in Congress, who had stood by him through thick and thin, started to distance themselves. The American public, once captivated by Nixon's foreign policy triumphs and domestic initiatives, felt betrayed. Confidence in the presidency plummeted, and calls for Nixon's removal grew louder. In the halls of Congress, the impeachment process began to gain momentum. The House of Representatives, charged with the task of investigating presidential misconduct, launched an impeachment inquiry. The House Judiciary Committee, after weeks of hearings and meticulous examination of evidence, adopted articles of impeachment against Nixon. These articles charged him with obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. As the impeachment process unfolded, it became clear that Nixon's position was untenable. Members of his own party, recognizing the severity of the charges and the weight of public opinion, signaled that they could no longer support him. In a decisive meeting, key Republican senators visited Nixon at the White House, informing him that he had lost significant backing in Congress and that his impeachment and removal from office were all but certain. Confronted with this stark reality, Nixon faced an agonizing decision. He could endure the impeachment process, fighting for his presidency in a battle he was likely to lose, or he could step down, preserving what remained of his dignity and sparing the country further turmoil. After much deliberation, Nixon chose the latter course. On the evening of August 8, 1974, Nixon addressed the nation on television. In a somber and historic speech, he announced his decision to resign, effective noon the following day. Nixon's resignation was a momentous event, marking the first time in American history that a president had left office before completing his term. The nation watched in a mix of relief, sadness, and reflection, pondering the lessons of Watergate and the resilience of its democratic institutions. The fall of Nixon was not just the story of one man's downfall, but a testament to the power of the American system of checks and balances. It demonstrated that no one, not even the President of the United States, is above the law. The events leading up to Nixon's resignation showed the importance of accountability, the role of a free press in uncovering the truth, and the capacity of the government to correct its course when faced with wrongdoing. Nixon's departure from the White House marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in American politics. It was a time of introspection for the nation, a period to reassess the values and principles that underpin American democracy. The fall of Nixon served as a reminder of the fragility of power and the enduring strength of the democratic spirit. This chapter in the history of the United States teaches us about the importance of ethical leadership and the vigilance required to safeguard democracy. It underscores the need for citizens to stay informed, engaged, and ready to hold their leaders accountable. The fall of Nixon is a story of redemption for the American political system, a narrative that reinforces the idea that truth and justice, in the end, will prevail. Chapter 15. Nixon's Resignation. In a nation gripped by scandal and uncertainty, the announcement of President Richard Nixon's resignation marked a moment of profound change. This chapter delves into the details of Nixon's resignation speech, the reaction of the American people, and the immediate aftermath of his departure from office, painting a picture of a pivotal moment in history. On the evening of August 8, 1974, millions of Americans gathered around their television sets, waiting to hear words that seemed unimaginable just a few years before. In a somber tone, President Nixon appeared on the screen, announcing his decision to resign from the presidency, effective at noon the following day. He explained that he no longer had a strong enough political base in Congress to continue his term, and that stepping down was in the best interest of the nation. Nixon's speech was a mix of defiance and sorrow. He spoke of his achievements in foreign policy, his hopes for peace, and his love for America. Yet, amidst these reflections, he admitted no guilt regarding the Watergate scandal. Instead, he stated that his resignation was a sacrifice for the country's unity and progress. The reaction across America was mixed. For some, Nixon's resignation brought relief and a sense of closure to a tumultuous period. Crowds gathered in cities, celebrating the triumph of justice and the strength of American democracy. For others, the resignation was a moment of sadness and disillusionment, a stark symbol of failed leadership and lost trust. In the halls of government, Nixon's announcement set in motion a peaceful transition of power, a testament to the resilience and structure of the American political system. Vice President Gerald Ford, a man known for his integrity and straightforwardness, prepared to take the oath of office, becoming the 38th President of the United States. The day after his speech, Nixon left the White House for the last time as president. Accompanied by his family, he boarded a helicopter on the South Lawn, raising his arms in a final farewell before disappearing into the sky. This image became one of the most iconic of his presidency, a powerful symbol of his dramatic fall from power. The aftermath of Nixon's departure was a time of reflection and rebuilding for America. Gerald Ford, upon taking office, declared, "Our long national nightmare is over." His words sought to heal a nation bruised by scandal and division, emphasizing the need for unity and trust in the government once more. One of Ford's first and most controversial acts as president was to pardon Nixon, granting him a full pardon for any crimes he might have committed against the United States while in office. Ford believed that the pardon was necessary to move the country forward, but it sparked a debate about accountability and justice that resonated with Americans for years to come. Nixon's resignation and the events of Watergate had a lasting impact on American politics and society. They prompted reforms designed to increase transparency in government and ensure that such a scandal could never happen again. Campaign finance laws were tightened and the Freedom of Information Act was strengthened, giving citizens greater access to government records. The story of Nixon's resignation is not just a tale of political downfall, but a reminder of democracy's resilience. It shows that in times of crisis, the principles of justice, accountability, and the rule of law can guide a nation back to stability and trust. This chapter in American history teaches us about the importance of leadership, the power of the collective voice of the people, and the strength of institutions that protect democracy. As America moved beyond Watergate, the lessons of Nixon's resignation continued to resonate. They serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the vital role of an engaged and informed citizenry in upholding the values of democracy. Nixon's departure from office, though a moment of profound sadness for him, marked the beginning of a new chapter for the nation, one in which the American people reaffirmed their commitment to governance by the people, for the people. Chapter 16. The Legacy of Nixon's Presidency. The story of President Richard Nixon's time in office is a tale of contrasts, marked by significant achievements and profound controversies. This chapter explores the mixed legacy of Nixon's presidency, reflecting on his accomplishments in foreign policy and the shadow cast by the Watergate scandal. Nixon's presidency was a period of dynamic change in international relations. He opened the door to China, easing tensions with a groundbreaking visit in 1972 that ended decades of isolation between the two countries. This bold move reshaped global politics and laid the groundwork for future diplomatic and economic relations between the United States and China. Nixon's diplomacy in China is remembered as a masterstroke, showcasing his vision and courage in foreign policy. In addition to his overtures to China, Nixon pursued détente with the Soviet Union, seeking to cool the Cold War tensions that had threatened global peace for decades. The Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT-I, led to agreements that limited nuclear arsenals, a significant step towards reducing the risk of nuclear conflict. These efforts demonstrated Nixon's commitment to peace and stability in a nuclear age, earning him respect on the international stage. However, Nixon's foreign policy achievements were overshadowed by domestic turmoil and the scandal that would define his presidency. Watergate. The break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters and the subsequent cover-up led to the most severe political crisis in modern American history. The scandal exposed abuses of power and a disregard for the rule of law at the highest levels of government, shaking the public's faith in the presidency. Watergate had far-reaching consequences, leading to Nixon's resignation and a period of introspection for the nation. It prompted reforms aimed at enhancing transparency and accountability in government, including new campaign finance laws and stronger oversight of intelligence activities. The scandal also instilled a lasting wariness of presidential power among the American people, influencing how future presidents would be viewed and judged. The legacy of Nixon's presidency is thus a complex one. On the one hand, his achievements in foreign policy demonstrated strategic thinking and a pragmatic approach to international relations, contributing to a more peaceful world. On the other hand, the Watergate scandal left a stain on his record, serving as a reminder of the importance of integrity and ethical leadership. Nixon's impact on American politics and society continues to be a subject of debate among historians, scholars, and citizens. Some view him as a flawed leader whose potential was undone by his actions in the Watergate scandal. Others acknowledge his flaws, but also recognize his contributions to shaping a more stable and peaceful world order. As the years have passed, the legacy of Nixon's presidency has been re-evaluated in the light of history. While the shadow of Watergate will always loom large, Nixon's accomplishments, particularly in foreign policy, have been given their due recognition. His presidency reminds us of the complexity of leadership and the dual capacity for greatness and failure that resides within those who hold high office. The story of Nixon's presidency is a cautionary tale about the dangers of secrecy and the misuse of power, but it is also a narrative of vision and diplomacy. It teaches us about the delicate balance of moral integrity and pragmatic leadership required of those who guide nations. Nixon's legacy, with its mix of light and shadow, challenges us to reflect on the qualities we value in our leaders and the lessons we draw from their successes and failures. In the end, Nixon's presidency underscores the enduring principles of democracy and the rule of law, affirming that no individual is above accountability. It is a chapter in the American story that speaks to the resilience of its institutions and the vigilance required to protect them. As we consider the legacy of Nixon's presidency, we are reminded of the importance of learning from history to ensure a more just and ethical future for all. Chapter 17. Reflections and Lessons Learned. In the grand tapestry of American history, the presidency of Richard Nixon stands out as a period of profound contradictions and lessons that resonate through time. This chapter reflects on the enduring lessons learned from Nixon's tenure and their significance for modern politics and governance. Nixon's presidency, marked by significant achievements and profound challenges, teaches us about the complexities of leadership and the fragile nature of public trust. One of the most critical lessons is the importance of transparency and accountability in government. The Watergate scandal underscored the dangers of secrecy and the misuse of power, highlighting the need for leaders to conduct themselves with integrity and for a system of checks and balances to function effectively. Another lesson from Nixon's time in office is the value of diplomatic engagement and strategic foresight in foreign policy. Nixon's efforts to open relations with China and promote détente with the Soviet Union demonstrate the potential for visionary leadership to change the course of global events. These achievements remind us that diplomacy and dialogue can be powerful tools in resolving conflicts and building a more peaceful world. Nixon's presidency also illustrates the significance of ethical leadership. The Watergate scandal, with its web of deception and abuse of power, serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of prioritizing political victory over moral principles. It teaches us that ethical lapses can undermine even the most significant accomplishments, damaging a leader's legacy and eroding public trust in government. The resilience of American democracy is another critical lesson from this period. Despite the severity of the Watergate crisis, the nation's institutions, Congress, the judiciary, and the press, played essential roles in uncovering the truth and holding those in power accountable. This resilience underscores the strength of democratic principles and the importance of an informed and engaged citizenry in safeguarding those principles. Nixon's presidency also highlights the need for continual vigilance against the concentration of power. The checks and balances enshrined in the U.S. Constitution are vital in preventing abuses of power, but they require active maintenance and the willingness of individuals in all branches of government to uphold their responsibilities. Reflecting on Nixon's presidency in the context of modern politics and governance, several lessons emerge as particularly relevant. The first is the enduring need for leaders who prioritize the country's interests over personal or political gains. Integrity, transparency, and accountability should be non-negotiable qualities in public servants, as the trust between the government and its citizens is foundational to a functioning democracy. Additionally, the importance of a free and independent press in uncovering truth and promoting transparency is as crucial today as it was during Watergate. The media's role as a watchdog helps ensure that power is not abused and that the public remains informed about the actions of their leaders. Finally, Nixon's presidency reminds us of the power of redemption and learning from failure. The years following Nixon's resignation saw efforts to reform campaign finance, enhance government transparency, and restore public faith in the political system. These reforms illustrate the capacity for growth and improvement in the aftermath of crisis, offering hope that lessons learned from past mistakes can lead to a stronger and more ethical governance. As we reflect on Nixon's presidency, we are reminded of the timeless lessons it offers for leadership, ethics, and democracy. Its relevance to modern politics lies not just in the specifics of the Watergate scandal, but in the broader themes of power, integrity, and accountability. By studying this chapter of history, we can better understand the challenges and responsibilities of governance, the importance of ethical leadership, and the enduring strength of democratic institutions. The story of Nixon's presidency, with its mix of triumphs and tribulations, serves as a powerful reminder of the complexities of public life and the perpetual need for vigilance, integrity, and humility in the exercise of power. It encourages us to reflect on our values, learn from the past, and strive for a future where leadership is guided by the highest ethical standards for the benefit of all.